Anna, when you were 10 years old, you had a near-death experience. Would you tell me how this happened? Well, it happened when we lived as a family in a house built in 1903, and these houses usually have a kind of mansard floor, above which there is an attic that can be reached by a staircase, and from there another staircase in the form of a ladder which leads up onto the roof. These are flat roofs, which are also ideal for hanging laundry, and these flat roofs have a trap door that can be opened to get onto the roof, and around this trap door there is a crenellated outer edge, which is meant to stop water when it rains so that the water doesn't come into this attic. I know it's a bit confusing, but in any event, I stumbled over the outer edge of this door and plunged headfirst down into the attic. My head hit a cast iron stove that was there, and then, I don't exactly remember, but I continued falling down the whole staircase until my body hit the ground in the mansard floor. Then I immediately saw myself lying there, and I also saw my body was there and that there was also blood, and I found this somehow interesting, but also rather strange. I didn't at all understand what had happened. So you were outside the body and you saw yourself from above. Yes, but I also had no sympathy, nor did I think, oh, the poor child, she has hurt herself. Or, this is bad news. I didn't feel any pain either. It was just nothing. It was like nothing. The only thing I thought was, isn't that strange? What's lying there? And above all, it fascinated me that I was floating, which I found much more interesting than the body which was laying down there. And while I was hovering, I thought, what's that now? If I breathe in a little bit, everything expands, and then it contracts again. And I was wondering if in this state of being I could move. But I never started experimenting with this state of floating, and everything was pretty quickly expanding, first horizontally, and then I floated away like a light cloud, and it quickly became a lot brighter. But I really didn't notice how the apartment or the house or the city had disappeared, but I rather was moving more and more into this brightness. And I cannot say whether it was a room or a place or anything else, but I was led more and more into this light and into this really tremendous love. And there, everything sparkled and vibrated. How can I possibly explain it? It's comparable to the light of the sun, glittering and vibrating on the small waves of water of a lake. But in this case, this glittering and vibrating was all around me. And next to me, two of these vibrating light beings came to me and accompanied me in some way. They came along with me, and they didn't really have any shape as we know it, but they appeared to consist of a sort of condensed light. And then I was included into their circle, and it appeared to me that this was a circle of light. And also, this circle of light was in fact only composed of light beings. And somehow I knew, or at least I felt, I can't really explain it, that these figures were male and female. And right in front of me was a male figure. And I knew this was my grandfather, who had died before I was born. So I hadn't known him during my lifetime, but I knew he was happy that I was coming, and also everyone else there was waiting for me in order to welcome me into their circle. But the two light beings next to me stopped me, and the higher being was a female, the other being seemed to be male, and both encountered me with such a love, and it felt for me like the love of a mother and a father. Well, at least that's how it felt for me. I can't describe it any other way. They embodied a divine kind of mother and father. The female being passed through me, whereby an incredible love was flowing through me. And then suddenly, the being was beside me again. And as I was already there, I then wanted to stay there, because everything was just so good and wonderful there. But then a voice formed and spoke, resounding through everything, as if through time and space. It's not yet your time, but that I could take with me now what I had experienced. But the time for me had not yet come, and from that moment on, a vortex started. I'll compare it with the water that runs off in the bathtub after you pull the plug, and when the water is spirally sucked downwards. And this vortex pulled me down and then back into my body. And the last thing I remember is, oh, how tight this is. Oh, it's too tight. And then this experience suddenly was gone. Every detail of it. Also because I was back in my body and still not conscious. I don't know exactly, but I do know that my father was at home that day and that he for sure found me and certainly resuscitated me somehow, because he was a medic in the army and he always treated all the injured himself. Even us, for example, when we burned a hand or something like that, it was he who treated us, and he didn't take me to a hospital or to a doctor. And in saying this, I want to emphasize that in this way, I hadn't been given, I didn't take any medication or injections that had a hallucinogenic effect. Let's now go back to the near-death experience when you stood in front of the circle consisting of these beings and when you recognized your grandfather. Tell me, what did your grandfather look like? I also perceived him as a light being. I simply knew that he was my grandfather, even if he didn't look any different from the others. How shall I put it? Sometimes you see in animated movies, for example in some of those spooky films, the formation of a kind of light being, or a figure consisting of colors, or a floating figure evolving on the film material. And all the figures I saw in my experience consisted of this sparkling light, including my grandfather. Nevertheless, I still knew in my heart that he is my grandfather, who was among all the other beings who were there. And he was, so to speak, the first to welcome me. It also made me incredibly happy that he and all these others were part of this circle. How has this experience affected your life? Well, afterwards I experienced some crazy things when I was fully back to life. Fortunately, I didn't have any bone fractures, nor did I have any head injuries, so I was soon again on my feet. But then I had some strange experiences. For example, in our living room, there was suddenly an armchair that was not there before, and an elderly man was sitting in this armchair looking at me, and he wanted to talk to me. But I didn't know how to put this in the context of my everyday life. And sometimes when I moved somewhere or opened a door, I saw figures in human shape. And of course I started talking to my family about it, but they said to me, "Oh, that's nothing." Well, I can no longer say exactly what else they said. And when I sometimes said, "Look, there, look over there, the beautiful light." But then they told me again, "There's nothing there." And thereupon I started to completely restrain myself. I completely repressed everything I saw, in the true sense of the word. Well, and whenever I met people, for example, it came to my mind that my grandmother had lost a baby, but she never spoke of this to anyone. But I knew it, and she said, "Yes." And then she just held my hand, and yet this child remained veiled like a secret. And in this way, I was later on wrapped in a mystery, but I didn't know. In fact, I had forgotten that I had had this near-death experience until I was almost 40 years old. And then I was on the bottom step of a staircase, and I could neither move upwards nor downwards. And then, of course, I asked myself, "Good heavens, what's happening?" And I think I felt rather frozen in this weird posture. Then this phenomenon was so strange that this must have something to do with, and then it came to my mind. Then the house came back to my mind, knowing full well that we didn't have such a happy childhood there either. And then I thought, yes, well, maybe it's some bad experience surfacing from the depth of the subconscious. And then I consulted a trauma therapist who worked with me, but who first assumed that, for example, at birth or before birth, there might have been a disorder that needed to be treated. Instead of finding out something about childbirth, a door suddenly opened inside me, and in a matter of seconds, the whole near-death experience that I had had on the occasion of this accident with the fall unfolded like a film before my eyes. And there was a sort of replay of the whole near-death experience. Mostly it replayed more slowly, but in parts also quite fast. And one thing I noticed most of all was that exactly the same feelings that I had had in the first near-death experience were completely present. And later on, while I was lying on a couch, my trauma therapist told me that for a moment he thought that I had lost consciousness, that I had no breath, and that I was going to die. But he trusted so much in the process and what was going on there that he didn't intervene. And then I took a breath again. And then he knew that everything was going to be okay. And from then on, a lot has changed. But it was not necessarily easy, because I also, then I could no longer bear any coarse behavior, characteristics, not even in myself, nor the rough manners and language of people, nor could I bear dealing roughly with others. I just couldn't bear that anymore. And so I finally realized that I wasn't raising my children as well as I could, because I was too strict and too unloving in bringing them up. So I started to search more and more for what it could be that would fulfill my life. And soon afterwards, I unfortunately had a nervous breakdown because also my marriage broke up. My marriage went on the rocks, but then I started doing yoga. And every time I was in a specific yoga pose, I breathed deeply, and in that breath, I felt that vastness again. Yes, there it was again. And yoga simply helped me to get on my feet and find my strength again. And since then, I'm really better. I can smile and laugh and enjoy my life to the full. I can approach people more openly and warmly. And I also have much better feelings towards others. I also have freed myself from this trapped state of being, as well as from what I had pushed aside as far as possible. And due to the fact that meanwhile, I also have met other people and watched your videos, I am so grateful and happy that all of this was neither just a singular kind of experience, nor something that was a dream or a child's imagination to counterbalance a world that is not so loving. And today, I'm happy to know that these phenomena really do exist. And I also believe that the divine is really present. It is there for all of us. And these guardian angels are also there for us all in order to guide us. And when I meditate, or just a light meditation of my heart, this then connects me to them. Anna, I thank you so very much for the interview. Well, I owe you a big thanks as well